Now, coming up next, you all have to stay in your seats because my colleague Bill Weir is going to be sitting down for a conversation with Vice President Al Gore, which I'm very excited about. But I just want to give you a taster of their relationship, just to give you a sense of what might be coming up.
And one big cheerleader for this idea happens to be a famous farm boy from Tennessee.
If you're looking for common ground in rural America, it's the ground.
My father taught me a lesson when I was about 5 years old, where to find the best, most productive soil. And I held it in my hand and it was black and moist. But I'm embarrassed to tell you that it was 50 years later that I understood why it was black. That's the carbon.
Since Earth's soil holds 4 times the carbon as all living plants and animals combined, Gore's farm east of Nashville is a working, growing laboratory to figure out the best way to keep it out of the sky and in the ground.
There's a perception out there that this kind of farming is for the Amish or for hippies or for small elites who can afford organic produce. Does this scale?
Yeah, I think it does. You used to hear that same argument applied to solar panels, where they say, oh yeah, if the wealthy elites can install solar panels, but look at what's happening now. In subdivisions and places all over the country, people are putting in the solar panels because they're getting cheaper electricity. I think the same thing's going to happen with regenerative agriculture.
Vice President Al Gore, everybody. Good to see you, sir. Or, as I like to remind myself every time I'm with you, I'd like to introduce you to the first major candidate to run on a climate platform for president and win the popular vote.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Thank you. I like the way you put that.
It gives me hope. It gives me hope. It's so
By the way, thank you for the job you're doing at CNN and opening up this whole climate beat in a way that's never been done. Bless you, Bill Weir.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I resisted being pigeonholed with a beat. I wanted to be a generalist. I like, politics and Hollywood and everything in between. But then I realized this is the beat that includes all the others.
Yeah, it really does.
Foreign policy, economics, healthcare, shelter, transportation, all of that. Let me just start with mood, with a bit of psychology, if I could, because when we were on your farm in Tennessee, it was beautiful. And I posed a question to you that kind of got your back up, and I hate to bring it back up now, but in researching my book and in covering this beat full time, it occurred to me at a certain point that there are 5 stages of climate grief. When we realize that the landscapes we grew up on are changing, maybe changing for better if we do all the things with renewable energy that science advises us, that the Goldilocks Earth I grew up on is gone now, and we're not really sure how this new planet works to replace it. And so it's natural to cycle through with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance until you get to acceptance, which is not surrender. But when people say Al Gore's the wrong messenger or they don't want to get out of denial, we kind of have to give them a break because this is a huge thing to wrap our heads around. You had a great answer where you say we don't want to skip past doing the hard work of fixing the problem because that's available to us. But I've noticed you get a lot more angry in recent years. You gave a TED Talk last summer about the oil majors capturing the entire climate movement as we were heading into the last COP. What are your thoughts now? Are you gloves off against the petrostates and the big corporations is getting in the way? Where do you see the state of play, and how's your mood in 2024, given everything that's seemingly turbocharged now?
There's a lot in that. Let me unpack it a little bit and start with your beginning and end on mood. The stages of grief that Kubler-Ross put forward, I read it back in college a long time ago. It's in a context that implies the person is dying and just sort of coming to grips with it. We have not been given a death sentence. we can survive this. I think we will win this battle. For me, the question is not whether we're going to win or not. I'm confident we're going to win it. The question is whether we're going to win it in time, because we're taking some very dangerous risks with the future of humanity by continuing to use the sky as an open sewer. And when I say the sky, you know that thin blue line the astronauts show us from space. That's a thin blue shell, and it's blue because the oxygen is there. And it's so thin, if you could drive a car straight up in the air at interstate highway speeds, you'd get to the very top of that blue line in only 5 to 7 minutes, and all of the global warming pollution would be below you. That's so, you could walk it in an hour if you walk fast, and that's what we're using as an open sewer. Still at today, 162 million tons every day spewed into it, and on average, the heat-trapping molecules stay there, if you average them all out, about 100 years. So it builds up, and the accumulated amount now traps as much heat every day as would be released by 750,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding on the Earth every day. It's crazy that we're continuing to do this, especially since we have not only viable alternatives, but preferable alternatives that give us electricity cheaper, clean up the skies, produce 3 times as many jobs per dollar invested, and the list of benefits goes on. Now, the heat that you've heard coming from me about the fossil fuel companies and the petrostates is for one simple reason, Bill. I'm involved in trying to help grassroots organizations all over the world and in regional groups and states here in the U.S. and provinces and cities, municipalities. Every struggle everywhere in the world to reduce the burning of fossil fuel, every single one of them. On the other side, you have the fossil fuel companies with guns metaphorically blazing, pouring money into the effort to stop progress at reducing the burning of fossil fuels. And I understand why they're doing it. I mean, in a way I do. I like to think if you and I were in that business, we'd do it differently. And back decades ago, when the science first started coming into these companies, they had great scientists working for them decades ago who spelled out exactly what was going on and exactly what was going to happen if they didn't do something about it. And there came a time in the mid-'80s when they made a decision as a group. I don't know how it happened or if there was, but they made a decision to hide the science that their own scientists were producing. And then to take the blueprint of the playbook from the tobacco companies, and you know this history, where after the doctors told us that smoking cigarettes causes lung cancer and kills people, they hired actors and dressed them up as doctors and put them in front of the cameras to lie to people and tell them there was no health problem at all. They decided to do the same thing. And they hired some of the same PR firms, some of the same irresponsible pseudo-scientists who their business plan is to lie for a living. And that was so deeply unethical, given how high the stakes are, that I kind of thought they'd work their way out of that. But then they didn't. They kept on trying to capture control of the policymaking process and now the international process. As I've often said, they're way better at capturing politicians than they are at capturing their own emissions. They've got the policy capture down pat.
And storage.
And excellent. I'll use that. I'll use that. And some of the storage units go through the revolving door and make policy themselves on behalf of the companies. And I actually think that the stakes are so high that they need to be called out. And so when I saw them, putting themselves in charge of the whole process by which the world is trying to come to grips with this, I said, come on, this is ridiculous. And I do think it's ridiculous. But we have seen a crisis in democracy and self-governance in a number of policy areas. This is the most important one, I think. And I think challenging their effort to dominate the policy making is a responsible thing to do.
Did you have any response from that, from those folks in the C-suites of these big corporations? Do you get any feedback that that message is actually resonating?
Yes, I have had some, but from a couple of the European companies.
Yeah.
I think ExxonMobil and Chevron are just gone. They're just gone, in my opinion. You know, I don't know what it'll take to bring them to a face-to-face encounter with the ethics of what they're doing.
Well, we're sitting literally in proof of changed hearts and minds. John D. Rockefeller, Standard Oil, gave us where we are today, and so there was an obvious change in the hearts and minds of the folks in charge here as well. I want to show a little clip of something. When people ask me these days, what gives you hope? The two things that I point to is pluralistic ignorance. It's the misperception of your fellow countrymen and women and how they might vote. And Yale a couple years ago asked, just guess, what percentage of people care about this issue, want to take meaningful climate action? Most people, regardless of party, guess between 33 and 40%. It's the opposite. It's 66 to 80%. You're surrounded by allies you don't know you have because people don't talk about this topic at school drop-offs and dinner parties. And I'm trying to experiment when I do talk about it to not even maybe mention the words climate change and just talk about exciting new ideas. For example, can we roll this tape? Most people don't realize that in California, or now Texas, which is the greenest state for energy mix in the country because solar and wind is so cheap, electricity is basically free. You know, Texas has been leading the nation in wind, and because of their libertarians in power, they're running transmission lines much better than the rest of the country. They say, we think a lot of people are going to live out here in the middle of nowhere. Let's run some lines. That's what we need everywhere. Now the challenge is taking all that free energy and holding on to it, storing it, right, overnight for a week. And this is a public school kid out of Oregon named Andrew, who decided that he was going to bet on hot rocks in a box. He's got a company called Antora, where he takes these blocks of carbon, like the pencil lead, heats them up so hot that you can make steel with them. You can move the heat through a liquid into a factory, make steam if you want, or you could crack open the box, like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the light coming out you can capture with another solar panel and get electricity out of it.
Wow.
And he's in the mix talking to Con Edison to make the steam that you see coming out of New York City streets, the biggest central heating system in the country. 3 million people live off of that steam you see in all of our movies. So what gives me hope is that guys like Andrew and his hot rocks in a box are going to be making steam for my kids' generation. But then the cynical side of me comes in, and I think about the scale and the time, like how much time we have to transition.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about energy these days? What do you think? Is it silver buckshot, 1 million ideas that will fill our needs? Do you see one emerging sector? And am I right to be excited about hot rocks in a box?
Yeah, there's a whole narrative out there about different hot rock technologies and companies. Yeah, I think, it's the scientists will tell you, some of them that know about it will tell you it's easier to store energy thermally than in the form of electricity. And so they're figuring out how to do that. And I am, like you, temperamentally optimistic. I'm very optimistic. But like you, I think the remaining question is, will we do it in time? And that's why the real question is, how can we accelerate the progress? And when you narrow it down to energy, which is a big part of it, 80% of the whole crisis is burning fossil fuels. The climate crisis is a fossil fuel crisis. The solution to the climate crisis is to phase out the burning of fossil fuels as quickly as we possibly can. Now, how can we do that? Well, we've got three technologies: solar photovoltaics, wind energy, and battery storage, along with the hot rock storage and other newer technologies, that can take this over. You talked about how surprised some people are at your question about the percentage of the population that believes this or that. I find the same thing when I ask the question, what percentage of all the new electricity generation installed worldwide last year came from renewables, principally solar and wind? Most people are surprised to hear the answer is 87%. And that's a reason to feel optimistic, okay? Now, the new amount installed each year is small compared to the installed base. And one of the reasons we need to accelerate this transition is in order to retire early the fossil fuel facilities where it already makes economic sense to replace them with solar and wind and batteries. And we're seeing that move forward. Now, electricity generation is the #1 market for fossil fuels. #2 is transportation. And now we saw a 35% increase in the sale of EVs worldwide last year. 1 in 5 cars sold now are EVs. And many more people travel on 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers than 4-wheelers. And almost 50% of all the new 2-wheelers last year were electric, 85% in India. So we're seeing progress there as well. Then you move into agriculture, and you and I have talked about that already, and it's a really important part of the solution. And then circular manufacturing and truly green hydrogen as a fuel source made from water and not from methane, which is what the industry wants to do. But in order to accelerate the transition, we have got to have sufficient political will. And I always make the point, and I believe it deep in my heart, that political will is itself a renewable resource, and it really is. It's not just a turn of phrase, but democracy is on the back foot right now. We see this populist authoritarian wave around the world. We're starting to see some coming back in the opposite direction in some European countries, and I think we can overcome it. But I think maybe, Bill, this process of globalization, particularly after China joined the World Trade Organization and started taking advantage of it, in my opinion, and others, and we went through the digital revolution. These things kind of unsettled economies all over the world and left too many people behind. And the efficacy of governments in stepping forward quickly to provide transition programs and job training and income supports while their citizens got used to this new transition with so many low-wage jobs flung out centrifugally to low-wage venues around the world. Governments did not do a good job. The U.S. government did not do a good job. And so there is an anger out there at the grassroots level in many countries about the rising income inequality. And the inequality is not only in incomes, it's also in political power. You've heard the old saying, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Well, the powerful have been getting more powerful, and the powerless have been getting even more powerless. And there's a feeling, well, we need to shake things up. And I think that is the fuel for some of this populist authoritarianism. But solving the climate crisis can be a unifying effort that brings people together, because we've all got the same stake in it, really, really and truly. Now, the poor nations are being hurt more badly, and poor families and rich nations are being hurt more badly. But we're all in the same situation. We've got to come together. And the good news is we can do it. We've got everything we need to solve this. We just need to build up sufficient political will and get the big polluters out of the catbird seat and take some of the money out of politics.
Do you have the Climate Reality Project, which has educated, at this point, millions? I don't know the numbers.
We have 3.2 million members. I just had my 55th large training here in this city in the Javits Center last month. Our next one is starts 1 month from today, a 3-day training in Southern Europe.
Right. But you're also going to add some heft in a different way. Tell me about the SCORE project.
You're talking about Climate Trace?
Trace, rather, yeah, Trace. Yeah. Which is letting the public fully understand where the emissions are coming from at the point source. Explain.
Yeah, well, first of all, the Climate Reality Project is my flagship effort, and when I went down the hallways in Dubai at the last COP, there were hundreds of graduates of that project wearing these green rings, and often they were the most persuasive voices on their national delegations. We've had these trainings all over the world. Climate Trace is a coalition of artificial intelligence NGOs and universities and other groups that combine efforts to produce the only comprehensive, independent, accurate listing of where all this global warming pollution is coming from. We've known basically that it comes from these technologies and those technologies, and China's the biggest emitter, and so forth. But now we can specify with great precision each one of the 352 million point source emission sites everywhere in the world. You can pull it up on your computer browser. It's free of charge, climatetrace.org. TRACE stands for Tracking Real-Time Atmospheric Carbon Emissions. A lot of companies are now using this data to make decisions about their supply chain, and many of them are substituting low-emitting suppliers for high-emitting suppliers. NGOs are using it. A lot of governments, regional governments, national governments in the developing world are using it because they don't have the capacity to find out where all their own emitters are. So this is already beginning to have a big impact because we never knew before where it's coming from. Now we know. Now we know.
And is the hope that that will empower the consumer, the citizen, to lean on their favorite brands or their local government?
Yeah, well, I know you well enough, Bill, to know that you share my feeling that years ago I had the kind of idea, well, once people know the facts, we're going to be able to solve this pretty quickly. But you know, it's not that simple. So yes, I think that a lot of people who learn more about where it's coming from will take action. But we're following up with specific programs and steps to work with the C40, for example, the mayors around the world, many more than 40 cities now, and other organizations, the Association of Energy Engineers. I won't go through the whole list, but we have a lot of programs in the works to use this data and make it actionable.
I got the best analogy on my beat from a fisherman scientist named Marty Odlin a couple years ago. All he ever wanted to do was fish the Gulf of Maine like his grandfather and father before him, but he went to study robotics at Dartmouth, earth sciences at Columbia, came back, realized the Gulf of Maine had warmed up 4 times faster than the rest of the world. All the cod were on their way to Iceland. And he got mad. And so instead of buying a boat he was going to call the Running Tide, he started an ocean repair company called Running Tide, where they use oyster beds as a drawdown mechanism, which also provides, protein and an income source for coastal communities, using these rafts with kelp, seaweed to draw down carbon. He's turning his anxiety into action in ways that we really don't even fully understand yet. But we're talking about the inability of us to describe this problem. This is the greatest existential threat, and global warming doesn't do it. We like warmth, the greenhouse effect isn't scary enough, and he said, it's a Godzilla. We've uncorked a Godzilla from the bowels of the earth. And at first it helped us do the heavy lifting and built the modern world, but now it's taking our fish and destroying our forests and our farms and ruining everything that's good. We should get pissed and go attack Godzilla. We should chop that thing up and bury it. And it helped sort of crystallize the idea, like every day, whatever your corporation, are you making Godzilla a little bigger today? Or did you make them a little bit smaller today? But I wonder if we could see Godzilla. I mean, we could see him in the 70s when the air was so thick. We got the Clean Air and Water Acts. The pollution was so obvious.
Yeah.
Environmental Defense Fund put out a new satellite to track methane, to show it to us in real time, and I know there's many more up there like that. Will that be enough? Will the knowledge empower us at this point to push past this fossil fuel addiction, for lack of a better word? And it seems like we just keep coming up with new ways to burn energy just as fast. AI computing, cryptocurrency.
Generative AI, crypto, EVs.
Amounts of energy, right? So what to do?
Well, I don't think the knowledge alone is enough. In my faith tradition, like a lot of people, I've learned the saying, you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. But in the world that we live in, the truth has to be actualized. You have to take action in order to translate it into sensible policy. And the efficacy, the workability of our self-government here in the U.S. is at a low ebb, And I often say in order to solve the climate crisis, we're going to have to spend some time on the democracy crisis. But I think that healing the democracy crisis can be sped up by focusing on the common cause we have to solve this climate crisis. And the example you gave of the fishermen in Maine, there are many other individuals, and you've interviewed a whole bunch of them in different walks of life who've come to the same kind of epiphany and have decided to dedicate themselves to being part of the solution instead of continuing to be part of the problem. But that process has been slow. And it's sort of like going back to the tobacco example. When the Surgeon General's experts came out and had their say on the news, then the news didn't follow up that much. And yet every day, day in, day out, night in, night out, there were all these commercials with the tobacco companies putting out falsehoods. And the fossil fuel companies are doing that now. They're more subtle in their falsehoods now, but they're just as effective. And they've got so much money that comes from, we're addicted to, you could call it a culture of death, digging up, drilling up, dredging up dead animals and plants, fossilized long ago, and burning them in ways that cause more death. And what about that is appealing? Well, the energy, we believe it's cheap. It's not really cheap because we're paying for it in other ways. How many tornadoes have we had this month? You're the expert on that. Something like 600 or something. I mean, it's crazy. The clusters are becoming more common, and I'm told that we are likely to have. I think I heard you report that they're predicting the hurricane season's going to be maybe one of the worst ever. I hope that's not right, but it looks like it might be. And what was the temperature in Delhi in India? Over 110 degrees for days on end. The areas of the world that are designated as physiologically unlivable are relatively small areas in the Sahara, even smaller ones around the Persian Gulf. But the continued increase in temperature and the continued increase in average humidity, because most of the heat goes into the ocean and evaporates into the air, more water vapor, and the warmer air holds more water vapor. The combination of heat and humidity is expanding those areas that are physiologically unlivable. And the prediction, unless we get a handle on this quickly, the prediction is, most of India, the Philippines, Indonesia, Central Africa, Central America, Northern South America, etc. We've had 10 million people come across borders because of the climate crisis in the last few years, and we've already seen xenophobia triggered in places like Hungary and Texas and elsewhere. What about 1 billion? That's what the Lancet Commission is predicting in the balance of this century. We could lose our capacity for self-governance. We can't allow this to happen. We have got to organize to accelerate the phase out of fossil fuels. It's just crazy. Now, here's the good news. There's really exciting good news. Number one, if we get to true net zero, the temperatures on Earth will stop going up almost immediately. They used to think they would keep going because of a positive feedback loop, but the lag is as little as 3 to 5 years, and if we stay at true net zero, half of the human-caused CO2 will come out in as little as 25 to 30 years.
People ask me all the time, what can I do? I really care. I want to do something. What can I do? And my stock answer is, well, what are you good at? What do you love to do?
Yeah.
Because this touches every part of your life. And if you're good with numbers and you're a CPA, boy, I got a few bird NGOs.
I've got a suggestion.
Yes.
Okay. ClimateRealityProject.org.
Okay.
ClimateRealityProject.org. Later this year, we're going to have a virtual training for the entire United States of America, no matter where you live. You will be able to find the latest scientific facts on the causes of the climate crisis, updated on the solutions to the climate crisis. If you want them, you will be able to acquire new communication skills. You will be networked with others of like mind. You will be paired with a mentor who will stay connected with you for as long as you want from now on to give you advice on how you can be a more effective advocate. And let me tell you this, for anybody who has felt climate despair, there is an antidote. They found an antidote for climate despair. It's climate action. So sign up, go to that website, climaterealityproject.org, and take action. And if you want to go through this training later this year, watch for it. We'll be in touch with you.
And you hope they use that training wherever they are?
Yes.
So
A lot of people have used it to give presentations to clubs and schools and groups. Some have decided to start their own local organizations. Some have run for office. The new Premier of Queensland in Australia has been through the 2 trainings in Australia and has been a mentor. Christiana Figueres, who went on to be the key person in the Paris COP that produced the Paris Agreement. She was in the first training in Nashville, Tennessee. We have a long list of graduates who have found, as you said, what are you good at? When you marry your own inclination and talents with this new knowledge and skills and the new networking connections, then you'll be more effective as an advocate.
The saying when I was growing up in the environmental wing was think globally, act locally. And these days, if you think globally too long, you can get really depressed. But I argue that's the time to act locally, lean across the fence, meet that neighbor, connect on shared values around you. Maybe if they don't even vote the way you vote, you might make connection there on a whole profound level. At least I like to believe that.
Yeah. Can I say one other thing?
Please do, sir.
Because we were startled by this hot news. And I wanted to finish the point that I was making. If we can stay at true net zero, 50% of all of the human-caused greenhouse gas pollution will have fallen out of the atmosphere in as little as a quarter century, 25 to 30 years. And if methane is included in the withdrawals, in falling out, it only has a 12-year residence time. We could actually see the beginning of cooling in the lifetimes of people in this room. We can do this. And by the way, shouldn't we want to give young people hope for the future? I mean, seriously? Seriously, this mental health crisis, and so, young women deciding not to have children in so many places and in so many families. One of the things that's about, they look at the future and think, oh, this doesn't look so good. Damn, that's on us. We need to change that, and this is the way we can change it. Political will is a renewable resource. We all have to get busy and renew it, and then phase out fossil fuels as quickly as possible.
Al Gore, everybody.
Thank you, Bill. Keep up your great work. Buy Bill's book.